Oh, so we're live. Welcome, Bob.
Wow.
Hi, guys. I am Kapil. I'm one of the co-authors of this book called Being Fine, the Other F Word, that Joe has put together. She is the editor and the publisher of the book. And I have with me Bob today. Bob is also one of the co-authors in the book. Um,
Okay.
how are you, Bob?
Yeah, very well. Thank you. Very well.
Yeah, we've never met, we've never spoken to each other, so
No, only
I'm
by
really
text.
excited. Yeah, so I'm excited. I'm also kind of like to hear your story and your like what inspired you to write in this book, what inspired you to like share your story. So why don't we start there? Why don't we start like just tell our audience a bit about yourself and what inspired you to get involved with this project.
I think to my core, I'm about adding value in whatever I do, whoever I'm working with. And so it's important to me that I'm contributing in some way. That's more important than earning money per se. I mean, I've got to live and I want to eat. So I'm quite happy taking the money. Don't get me wrong. It's vital somehow I'm contributing. I guess we've all been through different things in our lives, and I'm a great believer that I have a very strong faith, and I'm a great believer that a lot of what we go through is to develop our own character. And those experiences that develop our character can obviously have an impact on the development of somebody else's character. I mean, we are the same people today, and we will be the same people tomorrow, apart from the people we meet and the books we read and the videos we watch. If we don't listen and learn from other people's experiences, we've only got our own to learn from. And really, in this life, we don't have enough time just to learn from our own experiences. So I think it is, there's a responsibility on many of us to share some of our experiences that have developed our character and help other people. And of course, the issue of mental health, men's mental health and women's mental health, but mental health generally, it's too long been a taboo issue. And so many of us actually go through struggles. And because we're too busy putting up a front to look great on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and amongst our family and friends, then, this stuff doesn't get shared, so people don't get to learn. So that's would be the smallest summary I could give why I was motivated to join the other authors like yourself and contribute to this book.
Beautiful, thank you. Yeah, it's really interesting. I run a weekly men's group, and yesterday we had a men's group, and one of the things that I was sharing in the group was that over the last couple of weeks, I have felt sort of sad or like some kind of a heartbreak, or even, I don't like the word depression, but there's been that kind of like not having the motivation to do anything. Um, and it's really interesting how difficult it is to actually use the word, even like say like, oh, I'm feeling a little depressed. And so yeah, really interesting when you say about it's such a taboo to talk about and sharing our experiences. um, so tell us more, like I would love to hear your story, like what your chapter is about. Like you don't have to give the whole thing, uh, but it'd be great, like for me and for our audience, to get a gist of like what your story is and what got you here. To share your experiences and your character building.
Sure. So I think in the chapter I try and parallel a couple of different experiences in my life. So my first career was in nursing. So I'm a general nurse, and then I worked in intensive care units, so an ITU nurse. And then I went into psychiatry and became a psychiatric nurse. So I've got 2 degrees in nursing, my registered general nurse and my psychiatric nursing. And I spent some time at Guy's Hospital doing my psychiatric, learning to be a psychiatric nurse and practicing as an RMN. And part of that experience was working in an old institution on the edge of what is now the M25 near Dartford, near the crossing. And that place, Stonehouse, was a real old Victorian institution where there were just relics of people left, really, shells of people that used to be human beings. And so I've seen the extremes of mental illness, both from the fluid state at Guy's Hospital and of the shell leftover states when someone's personality has just been decimated by either modern medicine, I'm afraid to say, or from their own ill health. As I parallel an example of that with my own turmoil in one particular phase of my life where, under enormous pressure from what I, of course, believe is an unfair attack, I did suffer a quite severe depression. And kind of thinking through both those examples of seeing people who are seriously depressed and not ever imagining that I would be anything like that. And then coming to the realization that we can allow outside pressures to get us to a point where really we can barely function. And, it's tough. It was tough for me, and it's tough for anybody who goes into that place. I also describe a bit about my journey to try and find an answer with the encouragement of my wife and my family, and now how actually helping somebody else was one of the biggest answers to my own mental health. So that kind of gives you an overview of the chapter without all the gory details.
Yeah, it's beautiful what you said about helping others. And I guess as in the nursing profession, that's pretty much what was the core of your work, right? What you described there must be really intense experience to live through. How, tell us a bit more, how did you cope with that? And do you think that had an impact on how you got into depression?
It certainly had an impact on how I got out of it.
Okay.
So, really, guys, I spent a lot of time working in the community trying to keep young people out of institutions because, well, probably even today, although, I haven't been inside a mental psychiatric hospital for decades, so it's unfair for me to say. But, they're not the greatest places in the world. So if some people are becoming unwell, then work in the community with a lot of talking therapies and psychotherapies and occupational therapies and industrial therapies. There are lots of mechanisms in place in Peckham and different parts of London at the time. Anybody who's watched Only Fools and Horses will know the Peckham High Street. And I worked in a clinic, Speedwell Clinic, not far from Peckham High Street. And we were generally doing good work at trying to keep the young out of hospital. And at the same time, trying to get people who were institutionalized, the elderly, out of hospital so they could survive on their own in the community. And certainly I saw people, some of the most distressing sights, I think, weren't in ITU when somebody had a heart attack. or had had major car accident and surgery. You know, some of the most distressing sights I had to deal with were in a psychiatric hospital, because I think that mental illness is often something that you can look at someone and not realize how ill they really are. And that is quite hard to deal with. So when you parallel that later with your own mental health, and you think, okay, well, I've studied cognitive behavioral therapy, I've studied transactional analysis, I know how to look after myself, I know that, the warnings of stress, you think, although it was decades ago, I would know enough about that to keep myself well. And yet, when you're in the thick of it, when some shit is going on in your life, basically, all that goes out the window. And instead of responding to the things that happen to you, you react to them. And of course, we're emotional beings. We're not really rational beings. So we react emotionally. We get hooked into things. And that can take us up or it can take us down. And, it took me down. We can go through life with a certain amount of stress and it will increase our productivity. There's a positive side of stress. And if you look at the graphs on resilience, then actually the more stress you come under, the more productive you can be. But you reach a tipping point of stress. And once you go over that tipping point, your performance just plummets. And, I hit that peak and I fell off a cliff and I nearly threw myself off a cliff. So it's a huge topic, Kapil. It's a huge topic. And one more of us need to be prepared to talk about, because depression is not talked about. Men's mental health, I'm not going to show my weakness. I've got to be brave. Don't cry, little boy. Don't cry. All the stuff we do to our children and we do to ourselves to be roughy toughy and have this hard exterior and project success. All that is blah blah. The human bottom line is emotion. It's got a lot to do with happiness and sadness. Why don't we just get off ourselves and really start talking about what matters?
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. And what in your life has changed as a result of that? Like when you said you help people. I think there's an echo. I can hear myself. But what's different now in your day-to-day life, and how do you, especially with this lockdown and COVID over the last 7-8 months? I know a lot of people are struggling. Even last couple of days, I've spoken to people who are really distressed and struggling with their mental health. So how have you, what changes have you made in your life to deal with that kind of emotional impact and mental health? And also what do you, how important do you think this book, for example, we're sharing 15 or 16 different stories from men, and I think a couple of women as well. What importance do you give to that, just sharing piece?
Well, in answer to your first question about COVID, I think the biggest change I have made is being prepared to, one, encourage people to ask, how are you? I've trained thousands of salespeople over the years, probably tens of thousands. And I would normally teach salespeople, never ask a prospect you've just met or you've just spoken to for the first time, never ask them how they are. Because you don't care how they are, really. You've only just met them. They don't know you. You don't know them. That's rude. When they can recognize your voice and they know you by name, then you've got a relationship. Ask them how they are. These days, I think it's really important we all genuinely, authentically ask the people we meet, even for the first time, how are you? We need to be able to do that. I mean, in my little village where I live, there's like 200 people. Most people didn't talk to each other before COVID. We're all in a WhatsApp group now. We all talk to each other. We all help each other. No one's going to go hungry in this little community. No one's going to run out of tablets from the pharmacy or postal stamps, or no postman's going to deliver something to the wrong address, because everybody's talking to each other. Somebody dropped a pair of spectacles on the roadside walking through the village. They were found. There was an image on the WhatsApp group, and they were given back to the owner within the hour. And that's I think one of the huge benefits, if we would just take it within this crazy pandemic, is to actually reach out and say, how are you? How are you today? And really listen and really care. And if there's something you can do to help that other person, then help them. And the second thing during this crazy pandemic I've learned to do is actually answer that question authentically when somebody asks it. Because in the past they're going, yeah, I'm fine. Hey, I'm the motivator. I'm the enthusiastic sales trainer and leadership coach. I'm absolutely awesome. I'm good and getting gooder. Now I say, actually, I've had a tough week. There's some stuff going on at family, there's stuff going on at work. It's like, I'm really struggling with that. And I'm feeling the pressure, or I'm tired. I'm actually just telling people how I really am. And it shocks some people. You can see the look on their faces like, oh, I didn't expect you to say that. And I said, well, you asked the question. Yeah. You're either you mean I'm going to treat you like you actually meant it. So, but this last week, actually, I've had 3 people ring me and go, Bob, how are you this week? Because you said you weren't so great last week. And it's just like, oh, okay. So part of the strength comes from admitting where we are and being prepared to be vulnerable with other people instead of putting up this bullshit blah blah front. Why be a type of person that owns a wallet worth £450 and only have £50 in it? I'd rather be the person that has a wallet that's worth £50 and have £450 in cash in the wallet. And we can do that with emotions. Why put up this rubbish front and be hollow to the core? Why don't we just drop that facade and start to connect with real human beings in a real authentic way? And if you're in trouble, maybe I can help you. If I'm in trouble, maybe you can help me. I want to look after myself well enough that I've got the capacity to help you. And I'd love you to look after yourself well enough so you've got a bit of capacity to look after me. Yeah. And if we as people in a local community or in a business community or in a network like we are, Kapil, if we have that kind of mindset where I do want to look after myself selfishly and also to help you when you need it, and you do the same for me, I think that to me is would be awesome. So I think COVID's taught me an awful lot.
That's beautiful.
Your first question, I've forgotten your second one.
Well, I think you kind of answered it. The second question was about sharing. Like, this book is about sharing our stories, and why is that important? Like, generally speaking for men, I think, but especially at this time. And I think you partly answered it, but I'll let you answer it more if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I thought it was important to contribute to the book. I mean, part of the kind of cathartic exercise of writing some of this down is that I hadn't explained all of the intricacies of the depression to my own family. And there was I prepared to kind of put it out there in general society for general consumption. It's like, okay, well, if I'm going to do that, I've got to be upfront with my own family as well. So I think in in crystallizing ideas sometimes, certainly from a business point of view, I don't really have to explain how I am advising companies to grow their turnover to my family members. Most of my family don't, are not bothered about what I do from that work point of view. I think where you begin to deal with real human relationship skills, then your family do have a right to have some insights into the advice that you're giving out to others. And certainly if you're saying some things about your personal life, then that makes sense. But why contribute to the book? It goes back to this desire to help, and it goes back to the realization in my own life that by never talking about it, I haven't helped myself. So if I'm going to be of any value to somebody else with their mental health, then actually I've got to be brave enough to be vulnerable and put myself out there and go, okay, this, say successful business coach and entrepreneur actually had some shit going on in his life and had some tough times and got severely depressed. Well, okay. So does that mean I can't be successful in the future? Or that just because I was depressed, I'm not a good husband, I'm not a good father and stepfather? To me, there is a risk that some people will no longer see the shiny exterior. And actually, I don't care if you don't. I don't care. I don't want you to see the shiny exterior. I want you to see the real me. Not because that's anything special, because I'm a human being and I make mistakes like everybody else. I just want you to see the real me so that it might tempt you to be the real you. I have some hashtags I use when I'm promoting myself. My company is called Be More Effective. So I often put be more Bob, be more effective, be more you. And I think if we could all be just a little more ourselves, and if this book would just help one person be a little bit more authentic with themselves and the people around them, then it would have been worth doing.
I love that. I think that's such a powerful message and very inspiring story and message. I think, especially when you talked about like the authenticity in just answering, "How are you?" And I still find it difficult sometimes to just say how I'm really feeling, and I go back to, "Oh, I'm fine. Oh, I'm good." Partly because I'm like, "Oh, partly I am not sure how I'm feeling," and there's this thing that I hear from a lot of men is that, and I'm a culprit there. We don't want to burden other people. We think that we don't want to burden other people with how we are feeling. However, like what you just described there, that by being authentic, and I loved what you said about taking care of ourselves enough so that we have the capacity to help other people. I think that's such an important piece to like self-care is like our own oxygen mask is really important before we offer someone else the oxygen mask. And my hope is, I think people who are listening to this interview or read the book, because I do feel, and I would love to get your opinion of it. There's so many men out there who don't even want to like talk about feelings and emotions. It's like it's so suppressed, and it's almost looked as that, oh, talking about feelings or emotions is not a man's job, and my hope, I think, is that with this book and with these interviews and what we're talking about, some of those men actually read or listen or see these interviews and say, oh, maybe there is something. Maybe I can. How does it feel? Maybe instead of fine or good, if I say, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm feeling a bit miserable today, or I'm feeling sad or heartache. If they take the risk? What would that look like? You know, and I'm wondering, like, how do you come across a lot of men who have that kind of attitude?
Yeah,
And what would your message be to them?
yeah. So we do some assessments, career assessments. So we use a tool called the Berkman method, which 298 questions, you end up with a 72-page report. It tells you exactly what job you should do, what your career should be, what type of company you should work for, etc. And tells a lot about your personality as well. And so I'm doing a piece of work for a client, and we're going to use the Berkman on their recruitment process. So the boss and some of his senior managers wanted to take the report just to see what it was like. So the boss's report came in, and it showed that his certain aspects of his personality, in simple terms, are quite introverted and quite feelings orientated. And during the feedback session, he completely rejected it. It's just like, no, I'm the chief executive.
I have no feelings.
I'm hard. And he's fighting this 72-page report, and this report has a lie detector in it. And this lie detector is like, no, this is solid. There's no confusion. They didn't have any problems with any of the questions. And he's adamant he's like this big political beast when,
right.
That's learned behavior. He's learned to be like that. Okay, he's the boss. He is the chief exec, and he does run the company, and it is a successful company. That doesn't mean that he actually doesn't have feelings for his staff or think of them or worry about them. And that stuff is there, and he's kind of refusing to look at it. So that's quite fascinating. So I think ego and the image we've projected of ourselves onto our job and the rest of the world does come into this. And you might also see that as ego, but I think it's different. So I think we've got this sense of pride almost, and we've got this sense of ego, and it's very hard to lay them down and let the real person be seen by both ourselves, by really looking in the mirror. I mean, there's that crazy exercise that some people do in therapy groups where you kind of sent home, asked to get a big paper bag and cut 2 little eyes out of it. And then you can put the paper bag over your head, take off the rest of your clothes, and stand in front of the mirror. And kind of all you can see is the paper bag and the eyes and the body. And it's like, is that really me? Do I really look like that? Because, if you put the face on, you put the clothes on, but do remember to lock the bedroom door. You don't want anybody coming in with you when you got a paper bag on your head and no clothes. Looks a bit weird. But there are some fascinating activities that we can do both from a kind of physical point of view and a psychological point of view to try and really see the real me, because sometimes we kid ourselves, and we've been kidding ourselves for a fair old time, and we certainly kid other people. So I think that kind of pride issue and ego issue, they get in the way a lot, and you can get through a large portion of life without it causing you any apparent harm. But then at some point you realize you've built a ladder leaning against the wrong wall, and you're in a job you don't want, you're in a marriage you don't want, you've got friends you don't want, because you've not been true to yourself, and you've certainly not been true to the people around you.
And do you see that quite often? Like I remember you said you've trained tens of thousands of people in your career, and like, do you see that kind of like negating of their feelings or emotions, especially in sort of corporate environment? What's your experience? Is it like a thing? Is my sense is that it's a pandemic in itself out there, and I'm really curious to hear what your experience is and what you think is like just how common that is in especially in the corporate world.
I don't know if it's unique to the corporate world. Whether your business is big or small, it's human to human. It's still people. I think this is partly a human condition as we try and get through life. I mean, on the recruitment side of our business, we're advertising for some salespeople in London. We want 5 salespeople to work for a particular client, but you've got to have worked in a particular industry. It's very clear in the ad. You've got to have worked in this industry for a couple of years, otherwise you won't be considered. And we get, how many have we had? We've had something like 38 applications for these jobs, and all but 4 of them are from people who've never worked in that industry. Well, I'm sorry, but what am I going to do? Now, are you kidding yourself or are you trying to kid me? And you get people who fill in the application form and say, yes, I've had 5 years experience in your industry. And then you look at their CV and there's nothing there. It's not there. So I don't know if it's just corporate life. I think we do put on a front with a lot of people, whether that be family or friends. I think it's hard to be genuinely authentic. It's not as simple as that. It's one of those things which is really easy to say and just not simple to do. We get started in life. We start down a career path. Certain expectations are made of us from our friends, from our family, from our parents, from the people we meet. And I think you've only got to look at the range of short-term sickness in all businesses, big and small. You've only got to look at the amount of reports of workplace stress. You've only got to look at the number of people that struggle with addiction of some kind, whether that's sex or gambling or alcohol or drugs or playing computer games, whatever that is. All those are signs of some kind of stress. I remember my psychiatric nurse tutor, a lady called Diane Walker. She used to say, it's dis-ease. It's not disease. It's dis-ease. People are not at ease with themselves. They're not at peace with themselves. There's a hole inside them that gnaws away at them, and it produces suboptimal behaviors, if we want to put a posh term on it. And I don't know that you can be the best salesman that you could be if you're putting on a front and not being authentic. I don't know you could be the best leader of men or women of a company that you are destined to be if you'd only just be more yourself. There's a great book by Stuart Levine called The Leader in You. And the leader in you starts with the leader inside yourself and the leader in us. As before you start thinking about the leadership in the other people around you and in the team. Kate Turner in her great book, Create Motivation, the leader first has to create the motivation inside themselves. And if that's not authentic, if they are diseased, if they're not at ease, then we can't be at our best. So I think it's rife. All walks of business life, corporate or small, and in fairness, all walks of life.
Beautiful. I love that. I'm mindful of time. We're 34 minutes in. So I think I would love to finish the interview with maybe a couple of tips that you might want to give to the audience around how to be more authentic, or how if they are struggling in this period with their mental health and well-being, what would be a couple of things that you would say to them that they can actually take in their life and start practicing?
I think one of the greatest reflection exercises I've come across is in Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits. And early on in the 7 Habits, he talks about the funeral exercise, which sounds a bit depressing in itself. Sorry about that. It's a great way of getting at some of your core values and beliefs, because you do visualize yourself at a funeral, and you know, what would people from your family and from your business and from your church eulogize about you? What would be the eulogies read out at your funeral? You know, if you write those eulogies and think about some of the words that are in them, some of the key phrases, squeeze them in a wine press and get down to a core set of values, then you've got a chance to say, okay, if these are my real values, do I authentically live them out in my life? Because if our values and our behavior are different, then that's where the dis-ease comes from. So I think, you know, if you've never done that, I would implore you to get hold of Stephen Covey's work, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and conduct the funeral exercise. The other thing I would say that would improve anybody's mental health is to help somebody else. Help somebody else. Now, to help somebody else, you need to look after yourself well enough first, so you've got the energy, the capacity, the motivation to help somebody else. So you don't get off the hook by me saying just help somebody else, because that actually means you've got to look after yourself as well. It might mean that you've got to do some work on your fitness, or it might mean you've got to do a bit of meditation, or it might mean you've got to improve your diet. But please look after yourself, because I'd quite like you to look after your friends and your family and the people around you. So
beautiful.
Those 2 things.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bob. Those are amazing. Yeah, and I would add what you said earlier about when someone asks you, how are you? Take the risk and be authentic.
I agree with that.
See how it feels. Cool. We'll close the interview there. We're already 7 minutes past.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Bob, for coming on, and great to, you know, finally talk to you, and hopefully we'll meet once, you know, COVID situation is sorted. And for the viewers, I would say, I think the book's going to come out in December. We will post more in the Facebook group. If you are listening to this and you're not part of the Being Fine Facebook group, then please join us. That's where we have weekly interviews, and also we will post more details on when the book is going to be out. If you have any questions, do comment below, or in the group, anywhere you want. We'll be happy to answer. And please invite other people. Share this with anyone in your life who you think needs to listen to this. Other than that, thank you very much, Bob, and we'll speak to you next week. Oh, there's actually another interview at 9 p.m. Joe's doing another interview with another co-author, Jamie, I believe. Jamie Marley from Australia. So viewers can tune into that.
Brilliant. Lovely to see you, Bill.
Yeah, same here, Bob.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.